There is a particular kind of pain nobody really warns you about. Not the pain of losing what was bad for you. The pain of losing what was good. Or at least, what felt good. The job that paid the bills. The relationship that almost worked. The version of yourself that everyone clapped for. The habit that quietly kept you company at 11 p.m. You know the moment. Life starts pulling something out of your hands, and you can feel your fingers tightening before your mind even catches up. Not because the thing is evil, because it's yours, because you built a life around it. Because without it, you don't yet know who you are. And here's the part most people never say out loud. You cannot move into the next chapter of your life while still clutching the last one. The removal has to happen, and the removal is going to hurt. Tonight, I want to talk about that hurt, honestly. 3 stories, 3 men you've heard of, and one question I think you've been avoiding for a long time. Stay with me. You feel it already, don't you? That small tightening in the chest when somebody even suggests you might have to let go of something. Not a sin, not a vice, just a thing, a person, a role, a rhythm. Something that on paper isn't even hurting you. And yet the thought of losing it makes your jaw lock. I want to name that, because most people walk around with that pressure and never call it what it is. It isn't weakness. It isn't lack of faith. It's the very human ache of being asked to release what your hands have learned to hold. Here is the strange thing about life, and, if you believe in providence, about God. We rarely complain when something good is added to us. A promotion shows up, a relationship begins, an opportunity opens, and we don't sit down and demand a written explanation. We just say thank you and walk through the door. Try the reverse. Try having something taken away. Suddenly we want a memo. We want reasons. We want a committee meeting with the universe to explain exactly why this and why now and why couldn't it wait until we felt ready. That asymmetry, easy to receive, agonizing to release, is the entire reason most people stall out in the same chapter for years. Because here is what nobody tells you in your 20s, and what hits you somewhere in your 30s or 40s like a quiet punch to the ribs. You cannot enter the next season of your life while still standing inside the last one. The next thing doesn't show up on top of the old thing. It shows up in the space the old thing leaves behind. And that space only opens when something exits. Think about that for a moment. Really sit with it. How long has it been since something in your life genuinely changed? Not rearranged, not redecorated, actually changed. Same job, same circle, same internal monologue running on a loop, same arguments at the dinner table that you could perform from memory. You haven't been losing, but you haven't been gaining either. The water hasn't been moving, and stagnant water, no matter how clean it once was, eventually starts to smell. A life without removal becomes a life without arrival. I want to walk you through 3 men whose stories you already half know. A patriarch, a prophet, a dreamer, Abraham, Jonah, Joseph. 3 completely different kinds of attachment, 3 completely different removals, and 3 completely different costs for resisting what was already in motion. But before we get to them, there's something I need you to understand about the mechanics of removal, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. In the book of 2 Kings, there's a small, almost overlooked moment. A widow is drowning in debt. The prophet Elisha tells her to gather every empty jar she can find, shut the door behind her, and start pouring oil. And the oil keeps flowing. But only as long as there are empty jars. The miracle has a strange condition. Every jar that fills up has to be set aside, so the next empty one can take its place. Read that again, slowly. The flow doesn't stop because God ran out. The flow stops when there's nothing empty left to receive. The miracle is governed by the rhythm of moving the full jar out of the way. That is the whole picture. That is what most of us are doing wrong. We get one jar filled, one relationship, one season, one identity, one win, and we stand there forever, hugging it, refusing to set it aside, and we wonder why nothing else is flowing, why the oil seems to have stopped, why God seems quiet. He isn't quiet. The pitcher is still in his hand. You're just not making room. This is the part of Stoicism nobody puts on a coffee mug. Marcus Aurelius wrote it almost 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius said, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." Change is nature's delight. Not yours, not mine. We resist it like an immune response. But the universe, the seasons, the body, the soul, all of it is built on the principle that one thing has to end so the next thing can begin. The leaves don't apologize when they fall. The tide doesn't negotiate before it goes out. Only humans bargain. Only humans freeze in the doorway. And here's the quiet, uncomfortable truth I want to leave with you before we get to Abraham. The thing you're afraid to lose right now, the relationship, the title, the habit, the version of yourself you've been performing, is very possibly a full jar. It served you. It really did. It held something real. I'm not asking you to despise it. I'm asking you whether it's time to set it down so the next one can be filled. Because the hand that won't release the full jar will never know what the next one was supposed to carry. Stay with me. We're going to Abraham now, and his removal wasn't a stranger, it was family. Let's go to Abraham, because if you've been told the story in Sunday school, you probably remember the headline. God told a man to leave his country, and he went. Clean. Heroic. The kind of story you can fit on a bumper sticker. But the actual text is messier than that, and the mess is where you and I live. Abram, at that point, doesn't start in the promised land. He doesn't even start his journey from his original home. His father, Terah, had already pulled the family out of Ur. They were headed for Canaan. They never made it. They stopped halfway in a place called Haran, and they settled there. Terah died there. The trip stalled out in the middle. I want you to notice that, because it's so quietly devastating. Abraham's father had a destination and never reached it. He camped in the in-between and died in the in-between. And a lot of people listening to me tonight are doing exactly that. You're not where you came from. You're not where you were called. You're in Haran. You stopped because somebody you loved stopped, and you never started again. And in that stalled place, Abraham has one relative left at his side, a nephew, Lot, his dead brother's boy, an orphan he'd watched grow up. Then God speaks. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. Read that with adult eyes. God is not asking Abraham to leave a sin behind. He's asking him to leave people behind, his country, his relatives, his father's house. And Abraham, the man we call the father of faith, partially obeys. He leaves the country, he leaves the city, but he takes Lot with him, one person, one little exception, one quiet, "But surely you didn't mean him, Lord." And I'm not standing here to throw stones at Abraham, because most of us do exactly the same thing. God moves us out of a job, but we keep texting the old coworker who still poisons the well. God moves us out of a city, but we keep our identity tied to who we were there. God moves us out of a season, but we drag one figure from that season behind us like a shadow, because letting go of everything feels like too much. Why does Abraham hold on to Lot? Read between the lines and it's almost tender. He has no children. Sarah's barren. Lot is the closest thing he has to a son. Lot is his plan B. Lot is the human guarantee that if God's promise doesn't materialize, at least there's somebody to inherit, somebody to carry his name, somebody who shares his blood. Lot is Abraham's insurance policy on God's promise. Let that sit for a moment, because most of the things you're terrified to release are exactly that. Insurance policies on a promise you don't fully trust. The relationship you stay in because what if no one else? The job you cling to because what if the next door doesn't open? The friend group you outgrew because what if I'm alone? It isn't always love. Sometimes it's collateral. Sometimes it's the human hand we're holding in case the divine hand lets go. So Abraham walks into Canaan with his hedge bet beside him. And the story that follows is, I'm sorry to say, mostly trouble. Famine. Lying to Pharaoh about his wife. Strife. Their flocks grow so large the land can't carry both of them. Their herdsmen start fighting. Lot's choices start drifting toward the wrong cities. There's no spiritual breakthrough during the Lot years. Just maintenance. Just management. Just survival. Now look at what happens when the separation finally comes. Abraham, gracious to the end, lets Lot choose first. Lot picks the green valley near Sodom. He walks east. He walks toward trouble he can't yet see. And Abraham stands there on a hill watching the dust settle behind his nephew. And then, only then, does God speak again. Listen to the timing. After Lot had parted from him, the Lord said to Abram, "Look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever." After Lot had parted from him. The text doesn't hide it. The text underlines it. The horizon opens the moment the nephew walks off. The promise gets bigger the second the insurance policy gets returned. And I want you to feel the weight of that, because it isn't punishment. It isn't God being petty. It's the same principle as the widow's oil. As long as Abraham was clutching the full jar, the human guarantee, the backup plan, the relative he'd carried out of grief and obligation and fear, there was no empty space for God to fill. The land had been there the whole time. The promise had been there the whole time. Abraham just couldn't see past the figure standing next to him. Hear me carefully. I am not telling you to abandon your family. Abraham doesn't abandon Lot. Later, when Lot is captured in war, Abraham mounts a rescue and saves his life. You can release someone from being your center without releasing them from being your love. But there is a cord that has to be cut somewhere in your story. A version of obligation, of fusion, of I can't move until they move, that has kept your horizon the size of one person's shoulders. And until that cord is cut, God can keep speaking, and you'll keep hearing static. Some of you, right now, know exactly whose name just surfaced in your chest. You don't have to say it out loud. Just don't pretend anymore that you didn't hear it. Let's move from Abraham to a man whose problem looks completely different on the surface, and is exactly the same underneath. Jonah, you know the cartoon version, big fish, reluctant prophet, lesson about obedience. But I want you to look at this story tonight from an angle nobody preached to you as a kid. I don't want you to focus on Jonah at all. I want you to focus on the captain of the ship, because the captain is you. Here's the scene. There's a storm. Not a normal storm, a storm that the experienced sailors have never seen, the kind that makes hardened men start praying to gods they don't even believe in. The ship is about to break apart, and somewhere below deck, sleeping through the chaos he caused, is a man who shouldn't be on that boat. Now, the captain didn't do anything wrong. Let's be clear about that. He ran a legitimate business. He sold a ticket. Jonah paid in full and walked up the gangway like any other passenger. From the captain's perspective, this was a clean transaction. Money in, passenger on board, sail west. And that's the trap. How much does a ticket onto your life cost? Think about that for a second. What's the price of admission into your home, your schedule, your inner circle, your marriage, your evenings? For a lot of us, and I'm including myself in this, the price is embarrassingly low. Somebody is charming. Somebody is useful. Somebody brings money or connection or status, or even just relief from loneliness. And we sell them a ticket. We don't ask the deeper question. We don't check what's in their luggage. We just see the fare and wave them on. And then the storm shows up. Watch what the captain does first, because this is the most human moment in the whole book. He doesn't go looking for Jonah. He starts throwing the cargo overboard, the valuable stuff, the merchandise, the reason for the trip in the first place. He's losing money by the minute, watching crates disappear into black water, trying to make the boat light enough to survive. Stop there. That is exactly what most of us do when life starts shaking. We don't go find the actual problem. We start sacrificing good things. Peace of mind goes overboard. Sleep goes overboard. Health goes overboard. The marriage starts taking on water. The savings disappear. We throw cargo into the sea. Real cargo, things we worked years to build. And the storm keeps screaming because the storm was never about the cargo. You will lose what you didn't need to lose when you refuse to remove what actually needs to go. Read that again if you have to. Then, finally, the captain does something brave. He goes down. Not up to the deck, not out to the rail. Down, into the hold, into the dark. Because the thing that's sinking the ship isn't on display. It's not in the part of his life he shows visitors. It's hidden, asleep, comfortable, tucked away in the lower decks of his routine where nobody looks. And that's where most of our Jonahs live. Not in the obvious sins, in the basement habits. In the friendship you keep in the dark because you'd be embarrassed to defend it in daylight. In the screen you scroll at midnight after you said you wouldn't. In the resentment you've never named out loud. In the version of yourself you only let out when the doors are locked. The thing that will sink you is rarely on the deck. It's in the hold. He finds Jonah. He shakes him awake. He asks the question every storm eventually forces out of us. Who are you, really? And what are you doing on my ship? Now here is the part that pierces me every time. When Jonah tells him the truth, that this storm is following him, that the only way to calm the sea is to throw him overboard, the captain hesitates. The Bible actually says the men were afraid. They didn't want to do it. They tried one more time to row their way out of it. They tried compromise. They tried effort. They tried anything except the one removal that would save them. That hesitation is so familiar it hurts. You already know what has to leave your life. You've known for months, maybe years, and you keep rowing. You keep working harder. You keep telling yourself that if you just manage it better, pray harder, communicate more, sleep less, hustle longer, the storm will settle on its own. It won't. I have to be honest with you here, because I've lived a version of this. I spent more than a decade somewhere I was no longer supposed to be. Not in sin, not in scandal, just in the wrong harbor. Everything around me, income, identity, daily rhythm, the car I drove, the way I introduced myself at parties, was tied to that one place. And I couldn't see another ecosystem. I literally could not picture a life on a different sea. God had to use a storm to pry my fingers off the railing. And I want to tell you, it was graceful, and I accepted it like a saint. It wasn't. I didn't. But here's what the Jonah story will not let you escape. The moment they finally lifted him up and let him go, the text says it plainly, the sea grew calm. Not gradually, not eventually, immediately. The thing the captain had been afraid to do was the only thing that could save him. So I'll ask you what the old preacher in me wants to ask. Not who is Jonah, in this story. You are not the prophet tonight. You are the captain. And the question is simple, and it's heavy, and I want you to actually answer it in the quiet of your own chest before this video ends. Who did you sell a ticket to that you were never supposed to let on board? And how much cargo are you willing to lose before you go down into the hold and find them? Stay with me. There's a third man, and his removal didn't come from God whispering or from a storm at sea. His removal came from the people who shared his last name. Joseph, same family tree as Abraham, great-grandson of the man we just watched stand on a hill and finally see the horizon. And yet his removal is the strangest of the three, because it doesn't come from a voice in the night, and it doesn't come from a storm at sea. It comes from a dinner table. It comes from the people who share his blood. You know the outline, the dreamer, the coat, the pit, the caravan, sold by his own brothers to passing traders for 20 pieces of silver, dragged down to Egypt as a slave, eventually rising to govern the very nation he entered in chains. Hollywood loves the ending. I want to talk about the middle, because something quietly disturbing is happening in that family, and most of us have lived a version of it without ever naming it. Joseph sees differently. That's the whole problem. He's not better than his brothers, let's be honest. The kid is 17 and his social skills are a work in progress, but he sees differently. He dreams differently. He talks differently. He carries something his brothers can feel in the air around him, and they can't stand it. Not because he hurt them, because he reminded them of a horizon they'd already settled for. And here's the painful thing about envy you don't learn until adulthood. A stranger who succeeds rarely costs you sleep. A brother who succeeds keeps you up at night. The closer the blood, the sharper the comparison. The owner of a slave only cares what the slave earns him today. The envious relative cares about what you might become tomorrow, because tomorrow you might pass them. And something in the human heart would rather drag a brother into a pit than watch him walk past on the road. Read me carefully here, because I'm not telling you your family is your enemy. Most families aren't. But some of you are listening to me tonight from inside a room where you have learned, slowly, over years, to dim your own light, to not mention the promotion, to not bring up the book you're writing, to not say out loud the thing you actually believe God might be doing in your life. Because every time you do, the temperature in the room drops about 10 degrees, and somebody, usually someone whose last name matches yours, finds a way to put you back in your place. That isn't love. That's a pit with a tablecloth over it. And here's the part of the Joseph story that always stops me cold. God doesn't fix the brothers. God doesn't soften them. God doesn't sit them down for a family counseling session. God removes Joseph. The deliverance in that season is not reconciliation. The deliverance is geography. The caravan shows up, the chains go on, and the boy who didn't fit in the family ends up in a country where his gift can finally breathe. Say this with me, quietly in your own chest. It is better to be a stranger in a foreign land than a sibling in a house of envy. Now, and this is where the story turns, and where I need you to listen, Joseph does not stay bitter. He doesn't spend the next 20 years carving his brothers' names into a wall. He works. He suffers. He's lied about, locked up, forgotten in a prison cell for years he'll never get back. And somewhere in all of that, the man who used to brag about his dreams becomes the man who interprets other people's. The arrogance is filed off. The gift remains. And when famine finally sweeps across the region, the very brothers who threw him into a pit walk into Egypt looking for bread. And the brother they sold is the one holding the keys to the storehouse. Now hear me. The brothers who couldn't fit into Joseph's life at 17 do fit into Joseph's life at 40. Same people, different season. The removal wasn't permanent. The removal was positional. They couldn't be near him while he was becoming. They could be near him once he had become. I want you to sit with that, because this is where most of us get the lesson wrong. Removal in your life right now is not necessarily a verdict on the person. It might just be a verdict on the proximity. There are people who cannot be in the front row of your life during the season God is forming you. Not because they're evil, because their commentary, their envy, their well-meaning small expectations would suffocate the seed before it broke the soil. Later, when the harvest is in, when you are no longer fragile, when your identity isn't up for a vote, many of them can come back into the picture, but not now. Not while you're still in the pit, still in Potiphar's house, still in the cell. Some of you have been trying to grow in front of an audience that needs you small. Stop. The caravan that takes you out of that room is not punishing you. It's saving the gift. Stay with me. Because now I have to ask the harder question, the one underneath all three of these men. Here is the harder question, the one underneath all three of these men. What if the thing you keep calling patience is actually paralysis? Because look at what Abraham, the captain, and Joseph have in common. It isn't sin. It isn't rebellion. None of these men are running from God in the obvious way. Abraham is walking slowly, toward the land. The captain is doing his job. Joseph is, by every metric, the good son in a complicated family. They aren't wicked, they're delayed. And the delay, in every case, has the same shape. Somebody or something is occupying a space that was never meant to be permanent, and the person at the center of the story has gotten used to it. That's the part I want you to feel tonight, because that's where most of us actually live. Not in dramatic sin, in quiet delay, in a life that's been almost ready for a decade. And here's what I've learned the slow, painful way. The removals God asks of an adult are almost never the ones a child would expect. When you were younger, you probably imagined that the spiritual life was about giving up obvious evils. The drinking, the lying, the bad crowd. And maybe there was a season when that was true. But somewhere around 30, the assignment changes. Now the things on the chopping block look respectable. A relationship that isn't toxic, just tethering. A job that isn't shameful, just shrinking. A self-image that isn't false, just outgrown. A schedule that isn't sinful, just sedating. That's why grown-up obedience is harder than teenage obedience. As a teenager, you're being asked to give up things you can call bad. As an adult, you're being asked to give up things you can call good. And there is no Sunday school song for that. Let me get specific because I don't want to leave this in the air. Try something with me. Try, starting tomorrow morning, to give the first 20 minutes of your day to silence. No phone, no feed, no news. Just a chair, a window, maybe a page of scripture, maybe a page of Marcus Aurelius, and your own breath. Do it for a week. I'll tell you what's going to happen, because it's happened to me, and it's happened to every honest person I've ever counseled. You won't fail because the practice is hard. You'll fail because the practice will demand that you remove other things first. The late-night scroll that's eating tomorrow's morning. The argument you keep replaying at 1 a.m. The third drink. The fourth episode. The phone on the nightstand. You can't add the new jar until you set down the old one. That widow with the oil isn't a quaint story. She is the literal mechanics of your interior life. This is where Stoicism and Scripture quietly agree, by the way, even though they wear different clothes. The Stoics had a word for it. Procope, progress. They didn't talk about progress as accumulation. They talked about it as subtraction. The wise man is not the one who has acquired more. He is the one who has been carved down to less. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And mastery, the way he meant it, isn't a fist, it's a knife. It's the willingness to cut from your life the small comforts that are quietly running you. The Stoics called those comforts passions. Not in the romantic sense, in the older sense. The things that act on you while you mistakenly believe you're acting on them. The habit that you think you have. The relationship that you think you're managing. The role that you think you're choosing. Until you remove it, even briefly, you don't actually know which way the leash is pointing. This is the part I have to be careful with, because I'm not asking you to become harsh with yourself. The inner critic in you would love to take this sermon and use it to whip you for another year. That isn't what I'm doing. The voice of God in removal is never cruel. It is firm, and it is patient, and it is almost unbearably specific. It doesn't say burn it all down. It says, this one, this relationship, this hour of the day, this corner of the budget, this story you tell about yourself, one jar at a time, one lot at a time, one Jonah at a time. And in between the removals, there is grief. I want to name that plainly, because the videos that pretend otherwise are lying to you. When you finally release the thing, even the thing that was killing you slowly, there will be a week or a month or sometimes a year where the absence is louder than the presence ever was. The chair across the table looks empty. The phone doesn't buzz. The old roll doesn't call your name. That silence is not punishment. That silence is the empty jar, and the oil is on its way. Stay with me, because the next thing I want to talk to you about is what nobody tells you about that silence, and why most people refill the wrong jar before God can fill the right one. Here is what nobody tells you about the silence that comes after removal. The silence is not empty. The silence is recruiting. The moment a space opens up in your life, a relationship ends, a habit drops, a season closes, every old appetite in you stands up and starts auditioning to fill that space. Loneliness offers you the phone. Pride offers you a new performance. Fear offers you a quick rebound, a new project, a new identity to wear like a borrowed coat. The empty jar is sitting there on the floor of your house, and within 48 hours, 3 or 4 counterfeit pitchers will show up at the door, each one promising to pour. And most people, exhausted from the removal, just say yes to the first one. That is why so many of us live our entire adult lives in a kind of spiritual sublet. We finally end the relationship, and within a month, we're texting somebody who looks suspiciously like the last one with a different haircut. We finally quit the job, and within a quarter, we've rebuilt the same dynamic under a new logo. We finally put down the drink, and we pick up the screen, or the gym mirror, or the constant low hum of work, because the silence is unbearable and something has to be in our hand. What we forget, what the widow with the oil understood without being told, is that the empty jar is sacred. The empty jar is not a problem to solve. The empty jar is the entire point. The miracle does not pour into a full vessel. It pours into the one that is willing to wait on the floor with nothing in it until the right hand reaches for it. Sit with the emptiness. I know that sounds almost cruel, especially in a culture that treats every quiet evening like a personal emergency. But the discipline of staying empty on purpose for a defined season is one of the most underrated practices a human being can build. The Stoics called it ascesis, training. The Desert Fathers called it the cell. The psalmist called it waiting. Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord. Notice the verb gets repeated, not because the psalmist forgot, because he knew you would. Before I take you into the last beat of all of this, let me say one thing plainly. Because if anything I've said tonight has landed somewhere honest in your chest, this channel exists for exactly that reason. Stoic Patrol is built for the person who is tired of cheap answers and wants the slow, adult kind. If that's you, take a second right now while we're still in the quiet of this conversation and subscribe. Not for me. For the version of you who's going to need a voice like this at 1 in the morning, 3 weeks from now, when the silence after some removal in your life is loud and you need somebody to tell you that the empty jar is not a punishment. Now back to it, because there's one more thing about that silence I have to give you, and it is the most counterintuitive piece of the whole picture. The silence after a removal is not God being absent. The silence is God finally able to speak, because the noise of the old attachment has stopped drowning him out. Think about Abraham on the hill, watching the dust of Lot's caravan settle in the east. There is a moment in that text. The text doesn't describe it, but you can feel it, where Abraham just stands there and the wind is the only sound, and his nephew is gone and the desert is enormous, and he has no idea what comes next. And in that silence the voice comes. Look around from where you are. Not before, not during, after. Think about Joseph in the cistern. The brothers walk away, the chains haven't arrived yet. He is at the bottom of a hole, alone, hearing only his own breathing. That silence is where his first real conversation with God in the story begins. We don't get the transcript. We get the man who walks out of Egypt 20 years later, and you can hear in his voice that somebody talked to him at the bottom of that pit. Think about the captain after the storm. The sea grew calm. The sailors stood on a wet deck, soaked, terrified, alive. And the text says they feared the Lord. That fear, that holy, clean awe, could not have arrived while the wind was still howling. It needed the silence after the splash. So here is what I want you to write down if you write anything tonight. The empty jar is not the absence of the miracle. The empty jar is the room where the miracle becomes possible. The silence after the removal is not God leaving. It is God finally being able to be heard. Most of us, in our hurry to be comforted, refill the jar with the first thing that fits. Don't. Let it stay empty for one more week. Let it stay empty for one more season. Let the oil arrive on its own schedule, in the dark, from the hand that never actually let go of the pitcher. Stay with me. There's one more thing I have to tell you before we close, and it's the thing I wish someone had told me, plainly, 20 years ago. Here is the thing I wish someone had told me, plainly, 20 years ago. Ready? You will not become who you are supposed to be by adding. You will become who you are supposed to be by what you finally let go of. Read that slowly, because almost everything our culture sells you is the opposite. More credentials, more followers, more productivity, more square footage, more versions of yourself running in parallel browser tabs. And somewhere underneath all that adding, the actual person you were created to be is suffocating under the weight of what he is carrying. The Joseph in you is buried under the coat. The Abraham in you can't see past the nephew. The captain in you is throwing cargo overboard because he won't go down into the hold. The whole night, I've been telling you the same thing in 3 different costumes. Abraham had to release a person. The captain had to release a passenger. Joseph had to be released from his own family system. Different removals. Same architecture. Something was occupying the space where the next chapter wanted to be born. And until that something was set down, set out, or set aside, the chapter could not arrive. So, let me give you a few sentences to take into the rest of your week. Not as a list, as small stones in your pocket. The thing you are most afraid to lose is usually the thing that is most clearly defining the size of your horizon. The pain of removal is not the same as the punishment of God. Sometimes it is the most precise evidence of his attention. The empty jar is not the absence of provision. It is the precondition for it. And the people who cannot stand you at 17 may very well sit at your table at 40. Some removals are eviction. Most are just distance for a season. I want you to do one small thing tonight before you sleep. Not a vow, not a transformation, Just one honest sentence written on a piece of paper or said quietly to the ceiling. Name the thing. Not all the things. The thing. The full jar that has been sitting in your hand so long your knuckles have gone white. The lot. The Jonah. The chair at the table you keep performing for. You don't have to act on it yet. You just have to stop pretending you don't see it. Because the moment you name it, something shifts. Not in the world. In you. The cord goes from invisible to visible. And invisible cords run your life. Visible cords can be cut. I want to leave you with one line, and then I want to ask you something. A time to keep and a time to cast away. Read it again. Both are listed. Both are holy. Both are part of a life that is actually moving. The keeping and the casting are not enemies. They are the two hands of a person who knows what season he is in. The tragedy is not in casting away. The tragedy is in confusing the two. Keeping what should have been cast, casting what should have been kept, and then wondering why the years feel borrowed. Here is what I'll ask of you, and it isn't small. If anything in this conversation tonight named something in you that nobody else has named out loud, go down to the comments and tell me one word. Just one. The category, not the person. Job, family, habit, identity, city, story. One word. You don't owe anyone the details. But naming it in public, even with a single syllable, breaks something private in a way nothing else does. And then, if there is someone you love who has been stuck in their own Haran, watching their father's unfinished trip turn into their own, send them this video. Not with a sermon attached, just send it. Let the voice do the work. Some people will only hear a thing at 1 a.m, in the dark, from a stranger who isn't trying to fix them, and then go to sleep. Not heavier, lighter. Because tonight you stopped pretending the jar in your hands was full of something it stopped containing a long time ago. The hand that finally sets it down will not be empty for long. The pitcher has been waiting. It has always been waiting. It is, in fact, the most patient thing in the universe. Look around from where you are. North, south, east, west. The land has been there the whole time.